The sound of expensive leather shoes echoed through the marble hallway as Theodore Blackwood stood frozen outside his study door. His heart pounded as he watched through the crack in the door. There, in front of his wide-open safe filled with hundreds of thousands of dollars and priceless jewelry, stood Catalina, his maid. But what she did next would shatter every wall he had built around his heart and leave him sobbing like a child. But where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Now, let me take you back to where it all began just 3 hours earlier. Theodore Blackwood was not a man who trusted easily. At 52 years old, this millionaire had learned the hard way that money brought out the worst in people. His own brother had stolen from him. His ex-wife had tried to take half his fortune in a bitter divorce. Even his closest business partner had betrayed him for a bigger deal. Each betrayal had built another brick in the wall around his heart, until he became a cold, suspicious man who saw everyone as a potential thief. That morning, Theodore sat in his expensive leather chair, staring out the window of his enormous mansion. The house had 30 rooms, but it felt empty and cold. He had everything money could buy, but he felt poorer than ever. The only person who still came to his house every day was Catalina Rodriguez, his housekeeper for the past 2 years. Catalina was a quiet woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and calloused hands that told the story of hard work. She had 2 young daughters, Isabella and Carmen, aged 8 and 10. Her husband had died in a car accident 3 years ago, leaving her to raise the girls alone while also caring for her elderly mother, Maria, who was battling diabetes and could barely afford her medication. Every morning, Catalina would arrive at Theodore's mansion at 7 a.m. sharp. She never complained, never asked for extra money, and never seemed to notice the expensive paintings, jewelry, or cash that Theodore sometimes left lying around. Unlike every other person in his life, she seemed genuinely uninterested in his wealth. But Theodore's suspicious mind couldn't accept this. "Everyone has a price," he would mutter to himself. "She's just waiting for the right moment to steal from me like everyone else." This morning, an idea began forming in Theodore's twisted mind. A dark, cruel idea that would prove once and for all that Catalina was just like everyone else. He would set a trap. Theodore walked to his study, a grand room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive oak desk. Behind a painting of his grandfather hung a large safe. Inside the safe, he kept his most valuable possessions: stacks of $100 bills totaling over $200,000, rare diamonds, gold watches, and precious family heirlooms. His hands shook slightly as he opened the safe. The electronic lock beeped, and the heavy door swung open. Theodore stared at the contents: enough money to change someone's life forever. Enough money to pay for expensive medical treatments, to send children to the best schools, to buy a beautiful home. "Today, I'll finally know the truth about her," Theodore whispered to himself, his voice bitter and cold. He had spent weeks planning this moment. Theodore knew that Catalina always cleaned his study at exactly 10 a.m. every Tuesday. She had a routine: dust the books, clean the windows, vacuum the expensive carpet, and polish his desk. She was always alone in the room for exactly 20 minutes. Theodore's plan was simple but cruel. He would leave the safe wide open with all his valuables visible. Then he would hide and watch. He had already disabled the security cameras in the study, making it impossible for anyone else to see what happened. If Catalina was truly honest, she would simply close the safe and continue cleaning. But if she was like everyone else, she would steal from him. And when she does, Theodore thought with a cold smile, "I'll call the police and have her arrested. I'll finally prove that I was right about people all along." As 9:45 a.m. approached, Theodore's heart began racing. He positioned himself in the hallway where he could see through the partially open study door without being seen. The safe door hung wide open, displaying its treasures like bait in a trap. At exactly 10 a.m., he heard Catalina's soft footsteps approaching. She carried her cleaning supplies in a small basket: old rags, a bottle of furniture polish, and a feather duster that had seen better days. She hummed a gentle Spanish lullaby under her breath, the same song she sang to her daughters every night. Theodore held his breath as Catalina pushed open the study door and stepped inside. She set down her cleaning basket and looked around the room, planning her cleaning routine as always. Then her eyes fell on the open safe. Catalina froze. Her eyes widened as she saw the massive amounts of cash, the glittering jewelry, and the gold watches. Theodore watched her face carefully from his hiding spot, waiting for greed to take over, waiting for her to prove him right. But what happened next shocked him to his core. Catalina didn't move toward the safe. Instead, she took a step back, her hand flying to her chest in surprise. She looked around the room nervously, as if wondering if this was some kind of accident. Had Mr. Blackwood forgotten to close his safe? Had something happened to him? For a full minute, Catalina stood perfectly still, staring at the open safe. Theodore could see her face clearly. There was no greed in her eyes, no calculating look, no scheming expression. Instead, her face showed genuine concern for her employer's safety and security. Slowly, carefully, Catalina approached the safe. But instead of reaching for the money, she began gently closing the heavy door. Theodore's eyes narrowed. Was this part of her plan? Was she going to close it now and come back later when no one was around? But then Catalina stopped. She had noticed something that made her pause. A small, faded photograph tucked behind one of the stacks of money. It was a picture of Theodore as a young man, smiling happily with his parents who had died many years ago. His face in the photo was so different from the cold, bitter man he had become. He looked hopeful, trusting, and full of life. Catalina's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the photograph. She recognized that look of happiness because she had once felt it too, before her husband died and life became a daily struggle for survival. Gently, very gently, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her own worn photograph. It was a picture of her 2 daughters and her sick mother, all smiling despite their hardships. With trembling hands, she placed her family photo next to Theodore's picture of his parents. "I understand your loneliness, Mr. Blackwood," she whispered softly in Spanish, her voice barely audible. "We both know what it's like to lose the people we love most." Theodore's breath caught in his throat. He had expected many things, but not this. Not compassion, not understanding, not kindness from someone who had every reason to be bitter about her own difficult life. Catalina began to dust the inside of the safe with incredible care, treating Theodore's possessions as if they were precious family treasures. She polished each piece of jewelry gently, straightened the stacks of money with respect, and cleaned every surface inside the safe as if it were a sacred space. As she cleaned, she continued speaking softly in Spanish, and Theodore, who understood more Spanish than he let on, felt his heart breaking with every word. "My daughters ask me why I work so hard for such a sad man," she whispered. "I tell them that everyone deserves kindness, especially those who have forgotten how to be kind to themselves. Money cannot heal a broken heart, but maybe small acts of love can." She paused in her cleaning and looked again at the photograph of young Theodore with his parents. "You were happy once," she said gently. "I see it in your eyes in this picture. I pray that someday you can find that happiness again." Catalina reached into her other pocket and pulled out a small, handmade cross that her daughter Isabella had made for her at school. It was made of popsicle sticks and painted with bright colors, a child's gift full of love and innocence. With the utmost care, she placed the little cross inside the safe next to Theodore's most valuable possessions. "For protection," she whispered. "Not for your money, but for your heart." Theodore's vision blurred with tears he hadn't shed in 20 years. This woman, who struggled to pay for her mother's medicine, who worked multiple jobs to feed her children, who had every reason to be angry at the world. This woman was praying for his happiness and leaving a piece of her child's love to protect him. But Catalina wasn't finished. As she prepared to close the safe, she noticed that one of Theodore's gold watches had a broken clasp. Without hesitation, she pulled out a small sewing kit from her basket, the same kit she used to mend her daughter's clothes when they couldn't afford new ones. For the next 10 minutes, she carefully repaired the clasp with thread and needle, her experienced hands working with the precision of someone who had spent years fixing broken things to make them last longer. When she finished, the watch looked as good as new. "There," she said with satisfaction. Now it's beautiful again. She arranged everything in the safe exactly as she had found it, except now Theodore's possessions seemed to glow with the love and care she had shown them. The family photographs sat side by side. The little cross stood guard over the treasures, and the repaired watch gleamed like new. As Catalina finally closed the safe door, she pressed her hand against it for a moment and whispered one final prayer. Please, God, help Mr. Blackwood find peace. Help him remember that he is worthy of love, not because of what he owns, but because of who he is. Theodore could no longer contain himself. The tears he had held back for decades came flooding out. His whole body shook with sobs as 20 years of pain, loneliness, and bitterness came crashing down. This woman, this beautiful, pure-hearted woman, had seen through his money to his broken soul and had chosen to show him love instead of taking advantage of his wealth. All his life, people had wanted things from him. His money, his connections, his power. But Catalina wanted nothing except for him to be happy. She had given him gifts: her family's photo, her daughter's cross, her prayers, her care, and asked for nothing in return. As Catalina gathered her cleaning supplies and prepared to leave the study, Theodore stumbled from his hiding place. His face was red with tears, his expensive suit wrinkled from leaning against the wall, his carefully styled hair disheveled. "Catalina," he called out, his voice breaking. She turned around, startled to see him there. Her face immediately filled with concern. "Mr. Blackwood, are you all right? You look upset. Can I get you anything?" Even now, even when he looked like a mess, her first thought was to take care of him. Theodore couldn't speak. He just stood there, crying like the broken man he was. 20 years of walls came tumbling down in that moment. Catalina didn't hesitate. She dropped her cleaning basket and rushed to him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Sir, what's wrong? Are you hurt? Should I call a doctor?" Theodore struggled to find the words. I saw what you did in there." Catalina's face went pale. She stepped back, thinking she was in trouble. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood. I noticed your safe was open and I was worried someone might have broken in. I just wanted to make sure everything was secure. I didn't touch anything, I promise. Well, except your watch. The clasp was broken and I thought you might not notice and it could fall and break. So I fixed it, but I can pay for it if I damaged it somehow." She was rambling now, afraid she was about to lose the job that barely kept her family afloat. Theodore held up his hand to stop her. "No, Catalina, you don't understand. I left the safe open on purpose. I was testing you." The color drained completely from Catalina's face. She understood now. She had been set up, trapped, tested like a criminal. Her eyes filled with hurt and disappointment. "You thought I would steal from you?" she said quietly, her voice full of pain. Theodore nodded, unable to look her in the eyes. "Yes, I'm sorry. I believed that everyone would steal if given the chance. I've been betrayed so many times that I stopped trusting anyone." Catalina was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle but firm. "Mr. Blackwood, I have worked for you for 2 years. In that time, have I ever given you reason not to trust me?" Theodore shook his head, feeling more ashamed with each passing second. "My mother is sick," Catalina continued. "Her medicine costs more than I make in a month. My daughters wear clothes from the thrift store and eat rice and beans for dinner most nights because that's all I can afford. I walk to work every day because I can't afford bus fare. Do you think if I wanted to steal from you, I would wait 2 years to do it?" Each word was like a knife to Theodore's heart. He realized how blind he had been, how cruel his test was, how much he had underestimated this incredible woman. "But you didn't steal," he whispered. "You had the perfect opportunity, and you didn't take anything. Instead, you gave me things. Your family's photo, your daughter's cross, your prayers, your kindness." "Why?" Catalina smiled through her tears. "Because that's what people do when they care about each other, Mr. Blackwood. They give, they don't take. They try to heal, not hurt. They look for ways to bring light into dark places." She paused and looked directly into his eyes. "I see you, Mr. Blackwood. Not your money, not your house, not your expensive things. I see you. I see a man who was hurt so badly that he forgot how to trust. I see someone who has everything the world says should make him happy, but who goes to bed lonely every night. I see someone who needs a friend." Theodore broke down completely. He sank into his expensive leather chair and cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child. All the pain from years of betrayal, all the loneliness from living behind walls of suspicion, all the regret from becoming someone he never wanted to be, it all came pouring out. Catalina didn't leave. She didn't judge him or feel uncomfortable. Instead, she did what came naturally to her. She took care of someone who was hurting. She found a box of tissues and placed it on his desk. She brought him a glass of water. She sat quietly in the chair across from him and waited patiently while he cried out 20 years of pain. When Theodore finally composed himself enough to speak, he looked at Catalina with new eyes. "I don't deserve your kindness," he said. "I set a trap for you. I was prepared to have you arrested if you had taken anything. I'm a terrible person." Catalina shook her head. "You're not terrible, Mr. Blackwood. You're hurt. Hurt people sometimes do hurtful things because they're trying to protect themselves from being hurt again. But that doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them people who need healing." Theodore stared at her in amazement. "How can you forgive me so easily? How can you be so understanding after what I did?" "Because," Catalina said simply, "forgiveness isn't about what someone deserves. It's about what kind of person I choose to be. And I choose to be someone who believes in second chances, who looks for the good in people, who tries to heal instead of hurt." She stood up and gathered her cleaning supplies again. "I should finish my work now, Mr. Blackwood. Your house won't clean itself, and I have other jobs to get to before I pick up my daughters from school." "Wait," Theodore called out as she reached the door. "Please wait." Catalina turned around, and Theodore saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen in 20 years. Someone looking at him with genuine affection and concern. Not because of what he could give them, but because they actually cared about him as a person. "I want to make this right," Theodore said, his voice stronger now. "I want to do better. Will you help me learn how to be a better person?" Catalina smiled, and it was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "Mr. Blackwood, you don't need to learn how to be a better person. You just need to remember who you were before the world hurt you. That young man in the photograph with his parents, he's still in there. He just needs someone to believe in him again." Theodore looked toward his study, thinking about the photograph Catalina had placed next to her family picture. "Will you teach me?" he asked quietly. "Will you show me how to trust again? How to be kind again? How to find happiness again?" "I can't teach you those things," Catalina said gently, "but I can be your friend while you remember them for yourself." And for the first time in 20 years, Theodore Blackwood smiled a real smile. Not the fake, business smile he used with clients, but a genuine smile that reached his eyes and warmed his entire face. "I'd like that very much," he said. "I'd like to be your friend." As Catalina left to continue her work, Theodore sat in his study thinking about everything that had happened. He thought about the test he had set, expecting to prove that people were greedy and untrustworthy. Instead, he had discovered something far more valuable than any of the treasures in his safe. He had found someone who saw the best in him, even when he couldn't see it himself. But this was only the beginning of Theodore's transformation. As the days went by, he began to see his world through Catalina's eyes. He noticed how she never complained about her long hours or low pay. He saw how she carefully saved every penny to buy medicine for her mother and school supplies for her daughters. He watched as she treated his house with respect and care, not because it belonged to her, but because she understood that taking pride in your work was important regardless of who benefited from it. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth, and stay tuned for more incredible stories that will touch your heart.